Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome back to another PS5 video. So there's been some major improvements made to the Blu-ray drive implementation of the PS5 jailbreak and some major developments in terms of actually getting the 6.0 to 7.61 exploit finally up to the same level as some of the previous exploits we have on the PS5. So let's dive into that first of all, because that's the biggest piece of news here. So what we know is that there's an issue writing to certain kernel data pages on the PS5 on firmwares 6.0 and above, which is why we've not really been able to do anything on those firmwares. It's why we cannot get them to the same level as a lot of the previous firmware versions that we have jailbreaks for. So the big news around this is that this issue appears to have been solved. So we can see from this tweet from Zeko here, he says how to bypass kernel.data protection against writes by flats. So this all stemmed from a conversation on the research and development Discord where people like Spectre and Hammer83 were going back and forth about this issue. And then of course Flats just casually steps in and drops a solution for everyone to see here. He says you can bypass it using GPU write. It will allow to write to these regions, for example using DMA and AGX. In BDJ there is even a function to doing such a DMA copy. In Lua I have implemented it myself, filling CMD buffer and submitting to GPU, and then he lays out the function there. It's used there. Zeko also saying as a bonus here, Flats has also said that this could be used as part of some kind of hypervisor attack as well. So some pretty major bombs dropped right there. So it seems Hammer83 is going to be trying to implement this into his Blu-ray drive jar loader, which is currently used to load the umtx exploit on firmwares from 6.0 to 7.61. And of course it works on older firmwares too, but we have the web browser for those. So what this means for firmware 6.0 to 7.61 is that you should soon be able to get access to the same level of support that 5.0 to 5.50 currently have access to. So that would be things like, root access FTP for the file system, things like PS5 debug, cheats with ETA Hen's public beta potentially, 60 FPS patches, those kinds of things. You'd be able to get access to that. John Tornblum's homebrew launcher potentially. So all of that stuff is on the table for 6.0 to 7.61 now, with the only thing that would really be holding those firmwares back theoretically would be the fact that we don't have access to PS5K stuff on those firmwares, which could be resolved, of course. That's the memory map issue that we have with those firmwares, and that should be able to be resolved. I'm sure Slurs Govey will eventually work on porting that once he gets done working on PS5 Linux. All the firmwares from 5.0 up to 7.61 will essentially be on the same page as firmwares like 3.0 to 4.51 are now. So that is the hope right now with this new development on those firmwares. Now this could have some positive implications for older firmwares as well, because if we can get these firmwares up to the same level as some of the previous ones, that could allow us to dump games on firmwares up to 7.61, PS5 games that cannot run on older firmwares. So we could get a lot of newer PS5 game dumps that could then be backported to work on these older firmwares, giving everybody access to more PS5 games. So that could be another big benefit that comes out of this. Now there's also been some improvements made to the implementations of these Blu-ray drive exploits. So starting with Hammer83's, 2 days ago we got version 3.0.0. So this version does not include the updated changes to resolve the kernel data pages issue yet, but I suspect we'll probably see a version like that very soon. So what this version has is it now includes this new PS5 jar loader full version 3.0.0. All you have to do is download that ISO and burn it to a Blu-ray disc by using something like image burn, using the option to write image file to disk, and then you just drag the ISO onto the program or browse for it and click the button to write the image file to the disk. Once you have burned the Blu-ray disc, you can pop it in your PS5 and launch it. And you'll see that the difference here compared to the previous version is that we now actually have a menu built in. So in the top left, it tells you if kernel read write is enabled or disabled. If it's red, it means it's disabled, which of course means that you don't have the kernel exploit loaded right now. So this is just the initial menu. And then on the left option, you have the remote jar loader. If you select that option, that will allow you to send the jar files over the network on port 9025 from another device, like all of the previous versions have worked up till now. However, now what we also have is the other option on the right, which loads the jar files directly from the disk. So the jar files are now written to the disk, and you have this menu that you can scroll up and down with the D-pad to select whatever payload you want to load. So if you want to run the kernel exploit, of course, you're going to head down to the umtx1 kernel exploit option and run that, and that will take you over and run the kernel exploit. And then, of course, once you have the kernel exploit successfully loaded, It then gives you the option to press X to return back to the menu, and then you can load any additional payloads from there. And you can see we now have the green kernel read-write showing that we do in fact have the kernel exploit now loaded. So if we want to run any follow-up payloads that use the kernel exploit, like the kernel dumper, for example, then we can now run those here. So I don't actually have my PS5 connected to the internet right now to receive the kernel data, so there's not really much use in me actually running that. But also, if you run any of the games, like the tennis game here, it doesn't look like there's any option to exit, but you can just press the triangle button to bring up the like the play menu, and then you can just select the red square to stop, and that will actually stop it and take you back to the command line, where it will give you the option again to press X to return back to the main menu. And it's nice to have this whole menu ready for when new features get added thanks to this new development for 6.0 to 7.61. Now there's also been improvements made to the older Blu-ray drive exploit that uses the old IPv6 kernel exploit that works from firmwares 3.0 to 4.51. Now this comes to us from John Tornblom, who's been improving this implementation. He's basically added the payloads so that you can load the payloads directly from his GitHub repo from the disk, or from the ones that are actually written to the disk themselves in this nice menu system. But since then, he's now ported kstuff to work with his persistent elf loader, which is what's used on the Blu-ray disc, so you can now load the PS5 kstuff payload from the Blu-ray disc as well. Now, in addition to that, we've also had another version come out here from PS5 Exploit, which I believe is Moore 1. And this particular version here replaces kstuff with ETA hen version 2.0b, the public beta. So if you want to run ETA hen instead of kstuff, you can burn this version of the Blu-ray disc instead of John Tornblom's version. So if you want just kstuff, you can use John Tornblom's, and if you want ETA hen, you can use this version here. And I believe because you have the top list here, which serves you the payloads from the GitHub repo, from John Tornblom's GitHub repo, that if you run the PS5 kstuff from that top menu, it should just load PS5 kstuff because it's going from the GitHub, and then the version that you run from the disk will actually load ETA hen in this particular version. So you can still run kstuff and ETA hen with this one version. So those are the main updates made to the Blu-ray drive implementation of the PS5 jailbreak. And it's pretty exciting that we might finally have this barrier lifted on firmware 6.0 to 7.61, allowing it to get to the same level potentially as 5.x firmwares very soon. And then at that point, it's just kstuff that needs to get ported before all of these firmwares will get access to the same level of jailbreak, essentially from 3.0 all the way up to 7.61. That would be fantastic. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And once again, I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.